He didn't say no. That is the sentence that matters, not what was said in that hearing room, what wasn't. Because when the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation is asked directly under oath whether documents exist that implicate a former president in criminal activity connected to Jeffrey Epstein, and he declines to answer, the silence becomes the story. Patel could have said no. He had the opportunity, he had the microphone, he had the moment. In less than 1 second, he could have closed the door on everything that followed. He didn't say no. Here is exactly what happened and why it matters. The Senate Judiciary Committee hearing had been running for an hour and a half. Routine oversight, budget allocations, cyber defense, FBI Director Kash Patel had been navigating the session with practiced fluency, calm, polished, committing to nothing measurable. He had checked his watch twice, casually. The posture of a man who believed the hard questions weren't coming. That was a miscalculation. Subscribe right now if you want every document, every hearing, and every unanswered question covered before the networks touch it. Hit the bell. Never miss a moment. To understand what happened at 3:47 p.m. Eastern, you need to understand who John Kennedy is and how he operates. He is not a senator who stumbles into confrontations. The slow Louisiana drawl, the folksy phrasing, the self-deprecating humor, none of it is accidental. Behind that cadence is a Yale law graduate and an Oxford scholar who has spent decades watching Washington's most practiced deflectors work at close range. He knows what institutional language sounds like when it is being used as a shield. He knows the difference between an answer and the performance of an answer, and he knows that the most effective way to expose that difference is not to argue against it, but to build a timeline so grounded in documented fact that the performance collapses under its own weight. He had been building this one for weeks. At precisely 3:47 p.m., Kennedy leaned toward his microphone and said the name that shifted the air in that chamber, Jeffrey Epstein. He did not rush. He did not raise his voice. He placed a blue folder on the desk in front of him, thick enough to signal preparation, not improvisation, and he began to construct something that would outlast the hearing itself. Not an accusation, a timeline. Director Patel, he asked, how many documents related to Jeffrey Epstein are currently being withheld by the FBI? Patel attempted to widen the answer. Substantial material, difficult to quantify. Complex documentation. Kennedy cut through it. I did not ask for an essay, I asked for a number. Patel glanced at his attorneys seated behind him. Without reviewing our internal database, I could not provide an accurate figure. Kennedy looked at him for a moment. You are the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and you are telling me you do not know roughly how many Epstein files you are sitting on. The phrase sitting on did not land softly. It implied possession. Possession implies responsibility. And Patel had just told a Senate committee that he could not quantify what he possessed. Kennedy placed the number on the record himself. Approximately 2,300 documents related to the Epstein investigation are currently being withheld by the FBI. Does that number sound about right? 5 full seconds of silence. Then Patel acknowledged the figure was within the general range. Within the general range meant yes, and everyone in that room knew it. Drop a comment right now. Should the American public have access to 96% of the Epstein files that remain withheld? Drop your answer below. Out of those 2,300 documents, Kennedy continued, how many have been released to the public? Patel reached for process language, redaction protocols, privacy protections, ongoing considerations, the institutional vocabulary of delay. I did not ask about procedures, I asked how many. Approximately 90 documents have been released in redacted form. Kennedy repeated it slowly. 90 out of 2,300. That is roughly 4%, Director Patel. What is in the other 96% that the American people are not allowed to see? Patel's defense rested on familiar pillars, sensitive information, national security, privacy interests, the institutional language of caution that has been used for decades to justify secrecy. Kennedy did not attack those pillars directly. He removed the ground beneath them. Jeffrey Epstein is dead. Ghislaine Maxwell is in prison. The investigation is officially closed. So what ongoing investigation are you protecting? Patel shifted in his seat, the first visible movement of the afternoon. There are ancillary matters that remain under review. Ancillary matters. Kennedy repeated the phrase with a thin smile that carried no warmth. If the principal subjects are either deceased or incarcerated, What exactly are these ancillary matters? And more importantly, who are they protecting? That question was not rhetorical. Protection implies beneficiaries. Beneficiaries imply power. And the director of the FBI had just told the Senate that unnamed ancillary matters required the continued withholding of 96% of a completed investigation's documents. If accountability under oath matters to you, support this channel right now. Like this video, share it, because what Kennedy pulled from that blue folder next was the moment the hearing changed permanently. He withdrew a document dated February 8th, marked for official use only, obtained through proper channels, a phrase that signaled legitimacy rather than leakage. He read from it directly. Materials previously cleared for potential FOIA release had been redesignated as law enforcement sensitive and removed from the release queue. 47 documents, reviewed by career agents, cleared by Department of Justice attorneys, approved by classification specialists, then pulled back after leadership review intervened. Why, Director Patel, were those 47 documents buried again? Patel offered evolving methodology, updated risk assessments. Kennedy was no longer operating at the surface level of bureaucratic language. Did anyone outside the FBI ask you to reclassify those documents? The room did not breathe. Did anyone from the White House communicate with you about the Epstein files? Standard interagency coordination occurs on various matters. Did anyone from Donald Trump's legal team contact you about those files? Patel's expression moved through visible calculation before returning to composure. His decisions were based solely on national security and law enforcement interests, not external pressure. That was not a yes, and it was not a no. Kennedy refused to let the ambiguity stand. Have you communicated directly or indirectly with anyone connected to Donald Trump regarding the handling, classification, or release of Epstein-related documents? Patel said he would need to review his communications logs to provide a complete answer. Kennedy's eyebrows rose slightly. Epstein is not a routine topic that fades into administrative background memory. The suggestion that the director of the FBI could not recall whether he had discussed Epstein-related document handling with anyone connected to Donald Trump landed as implausible in that room, and it landed that way for a reason. Then Kennedy stood up. In Senate hearings, senators rarely stand during questioning. It breaks the visual architecture of the proceeding. It is a signal, a deliberate one. He held up a phone log. February 23rd, 10:47 p.m., a call placed from Patel's personal cell phone, duration 17 minutes. Recipient, Kasowitz Benson Torres, a law firm publicly known for representing Donald Trump. Do you know who that firm represents, Director Patel? Patel said he speaks with many attorneys in the course of his duties. That firm represents Donald Trump, Kennedy replied, and according to this log, you spoke with someone there for 17 minutes. 3 weeks after taking office, 2 days before those 47 documents were reclassified. He paused, then one more time. Did anyone connected to Donald Trump ask you to bury the Epstein files? The silence that followed was not procedural, it was existential, because at that moment the issue was no longer document counts or redaction policy, it was loyalty versus obligation, and the director of the FBI was sitting inside a timeline he could not contradict without consequence. Senator, that call concerned a separate matter. Kennedy did not raise his voice, he invoked Louisiana. If it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, and quacks like a duck, it is probably not a chicken. You reclassified documents that were about to expose powerful people. You did so after speaking with Trump's lawyers, and now you ask us to accept that it is coincidence. Do I look like I was born yesterday? Patel insisted he resented the implication. Kennedy did not frame it as implication, he framed it as sequence. You spoke to Trump's lawyers. Documents were reclassified. You refused to provide a clear answer. Those are facts, and the American people can draw their own conclusions. If watching the record speak for itself matters to you, like this video right now. Every like keeps this investigation visible. Then came the final question, the one that will not leave this record. Are there documents in the Epstein files that directly implicate Donald Trump in criminal activity? Patel stated he could not comment on classified materials in an open setting. Kennedy clarified that he was not asking for content, only for existence. Do such documents exist, yes or no? Patel declined to answer. Kennedy turned toward the camera, not toward Patel, toward the people watching at home, bypassing the institutional filters of the hearing room entirely and addressing the public directly. The director of the FBI just refused to deny that evidence exists connecting Donald Trump to Jeffrey Epstein's criminal activities. He could have said no, he did not. That sentence is now in the permanent congressional record, and it will remain there regardless of what press releases follow, regardless of what statements are issued, regardless of what explanations are offered after the cameras leave the room. Here is what that sequence means when laid out on the record without interpretation. 2,300 documents withheld, 90 released, that is 4%. 47 documents cleared for release by career agents, DOJ attorneys, and classification specialists, then pulled back under director-level review after Patel assumed office. A 17-minute phone call to Trump's law firm at 10:47 p.m. on February 23rd, 2 days before that reclassification. A refusal on the record, under oath, to deny that documents implicating Trump exist in the Epstein files. Patel's defenders have offered responses to each element of that sequence. Classification decisions routinely evolve as leadership reassesses risk profiles. Directors consult with outside counsel on matters unrelated to ongoing investigations. The call may have concerned something entirely separate from Epstein. These are plausible arguments in isolation. But here is where they collapse. If career agents, DOJ attorneys, and classification specialists had already reviewed those 47 documents and deemed them releasable with appropriate redactions, what precisely changed? What new risk emerged between clearance and redesignation? What specific information became newly sensitive in the weeks after Patel assumed the directorship? That question was never directly answered, not in the hearing, not in any public statement afterward. And in congressional oversight, unanswered procedural questions do not disappear, they compound. They become the foundation for the next subpoena, the next closed-door briefing request, the next Inspector General referral. They accumulate in the record until the weight of accumulated unanswered questions demands a response that procedural language can no longer absorb. Patel also had an option that he did not exercise. He could have offered to address Kennedy's final question in a classified session. He could have said he could not confirm or deny content in an open setting but would provide a complete answer in a closed briefing. He did not make that offer. And the absence of that offer, the absence of any alternative transparency mechanism, becomes part of the record as well. Kennedy did not accuse Patel of obstruction. He never used that word. He did not demand resignation. He did not declare a verdict. He built a timeline and forced Patel to sit inside it without contradiction. That is the document that now exists in the permanent congressional record. A number, 2,300. A percentage, 4. A count, 47 reclassified. A timestamp, 10:47 p.m., February 23rd, 17 minutes. A refusal, decline to answer yes or no. Each element individually might be explained. Together they form a structure, and structures built from documented facts and congressional records do not collapse under political pressure. They wait. They wait for the next hearing, for the next document request, for the Inspector General referral, for the closed-door briefing that either confirms or denies what the open record implies. Kennedy did not close this story in that chamber. He opened it. He placed a sequence in the record that now requires resolution. Not because he demanded it, because the record demands it. Patel could have said no. He had the microphone. He had the moment. One word would have changed everything that followed. He didn't say no. And that silence is now part of the permanent record of the United States Senate, alongside the phone log, alongside the reclassification memo, alongside the 2,300 withheld documents and the 4% that were released. The record does not forget, and it does not wait for permission to speak. Share this video with everyone you know who believes the Epstein files deserve full transparency. The next hearing will determine whether this silence produces answers or disappears into the same managed record it exposed. Subscribe and hit the bell, because the moment this channel goes quiet is the moment these questions stop being asked.